Alright, hey guys, so if you want to watch just one review video really quickly to review for your test on Monday, I recommend doing these ecology practice questions along with me. Some of these might show up on your actual test, some of them are just practicing good test-taking strategies. So follow along and we'll go through as many questions as we can. Alright, so these first two are two ones about abiotic factors. It says, what are the abiotic factors that characterize a forest ecosystem? So before we even read the answers, we want to remember what abiotic factors mean. Now, simply A means not, biotic means living, so think of non-living factors in an ecosystem. So what are some of those non-living factors? We can think of temperature, we can think of climate, we can think of rocks, we can think of the sun. All of those things are our abiotic factors. So let's see which answers have abiotic factors and abiotic factors only. Not A, that's light and biodiversity. Light would be fine. Biodiversity is living, like all the living things in an area. Temperature and the amount of available water. Now this is a good one because water is non-living. It's important. It's a very important material for living things, but it is not itself. It's neither an organic compound nor is it alive. C, procedures and decomposers. Again, decomposers would be living, so it doesn't count. pH and number of heterotrophs, also living things. So our best answer would be B. There we go. What abiotic factors affect the growth and survival of seaweed, small fish, and sharks? Again, even if we don't know anything about seaweed, small fish, and sharks, we can think of abiotic factors and see if any of the answers match up. So, looking at the first one, sunlight, temperature, and minerals, those are all abiotic factors, so that might be a good answer. Sunlight, pH, and type of seaweed, close, but seaweed again is living. C and D both have living things in them, so our best answer is A. All right, moving on. Here we have a trophic pyramid or an energy pyramid. The diagram below represents an energy pyramid. Which organisms would most likely be found at level A? So we have our different types of organisms. They're not telling us what they are, but we have to guess. And if we remember, at the bottom of the pyramid, we have our producers. So these are organisms that generally are going to take sunlight energy and through photosynthesis convert it into the food that they need, their glucose. So at the very bottom, we would look for something that would be a producer, something that could do photosynthesis. Birds can't do it, worms can't do it. Our best guess here is algae, because algae can do photosynthesis. It's green, it has chlorophyll like plants do. So there we go. And again, algae is not a plant, it is a protist, so keep that in mind, but it is photosynthetic, making it a producer. So it would be at the bottom of the pyramid, and other things would consume it. All right, so this one is a little tricky. It's about the nitrogen cycle, which we didn't go into depth about. We did, our cycles for like one day, but let's see if we can figure out the answer without, memorizing the nitrogen cycle. So it says, base your answer to the following question on the diagram below of a nitrogen cycle and on your knowledge of biology. So you can just, with your general knowledge, try to figure this out. So we have here our different organisms that are, taking nitrogen and converting it into different forms. We have our question here that asks, the action of decomposers is represented by the arrows. So it's asking for which arrow is going to be representing our decomposers. And if we remember decomposers, we think of these as organisms that are going to break down dead organic material and basically are the recyclers of our environment. So generally we're going to find decomposers in the soil, so that may be a good place to start. We have letters E and letters F here, letters D and letters C all in the soil. We have our dead organic material here. Something is going on and converting it to NH3, our nitrites, and then animal waste here is the same process. So without even knowing much about the nitrogen cycle and where these decomposers are and what they are, we can probably guess that our, not nitrites, ammonia. We can probably guess that our animal waste here and our dead plants is being converted somehow to ammonia by decomposers. Later on, it will be converted to nitrates and nitrites is later on in part of the nitrogen cycle, but I really don't want you memorizing all the specific details of the nitrogen cycle. What I do want you looking at is that E and F are probably going to be our decomposers based on where they are positioned and what they're doing with dead plants and animal waste. And so E and F would probably be our best guess here. All right, here's another food web or flow of energy diagram. Remember, food webs have lots of different interconnected pathways, and food chains just have one pathway. So that's how you can tell the difference. Sometimes it'll ask you if it's food web or food chain. Food web, lots of different pathways. Food chain, just one. So here we go. A decrease in the grass population will most immediately decrease the available energy for, again, without looking at the answers, let's see what we got over here. If grass went down, it would affect directly the mice, probably, because the mice are just eating the grass. Would probably affect the deer a little bit, but the deer have another source of food. You can see this arrow is pointing to their stomach. That means the deer are eating the trees. It would probably affect the rabbit. Doesn't look like in this ecosystem they have another source of food. Oops, gave away the answer. And it would probably affect the crickets. So out of the rabbit, the mice, and the crickets, the mouse is the only one in our answers that would work. So there we go. Okay, the diagram below represents a food web. Very complicated food web. We've got lots of things going on. Which statement regarding organisms in this food web is correct? A, there would be more snakes than pocket gophers. Okay. There would be more coyotes than rabbits. There would be more insects than insect-eating birds. There would be more hawks than seed-eating birds. So for this one, we want to remember our energy pyramids or our trophic levels. And we remember at the very bottom of the pyramid, we have the most number of organisms, the greatest biomass, and the most energy. So all these things, the lower level organisms, so the producers and the primary consumers, we're going to have more of those than at the top level, than our top level consumers in an ecosystem. So basically, we're looking for something that would be lower on our food web, our energy pyramid, so either a producer or a low-level consumer. There would be more of those. So looking at our answers here, the best one is probably C, because there's more insects than insect-eating birds. Remember, insect-eating birds are going to be consuming those insects, so they're higher on those levels. So if we look back at our pyramid, whoops, there we go. If, our insects were primary consumers, then our insect-eating birds would be secondary consumers, which means there would be fewer of them because our numbers go down as the pyramid goes up, and our answer is, in fact, C. Okay. In the diagram below, which organism is classified both as a primary and secondary consumer? Remember, our primary consumers are the first organisms to eat those producers. So a mouse would be a primary consumer here, as well as a raccoon. But it looks like the mouse doesn't have anything else that it eats in this particular food web. There's nothing else pointing towards its stomach as far as our arrows go. So let's look at the raccoon. The raccoon eats corn, but the raccoon also eats mice, as we see this particular diagram. So we can say it's a primary consumer because it's the first organism to eat the corn. But it's also a secondary consumer because the mouse will eat the corn and then the mouse will be eaten by the raccoon. So this would be our primary here and our secondary here. So our raccoon is both a primary and secondary consumer. And there we go. All right, one last one, I think. One advantage of biodiversity in an ecosystem is that it so remember our advantages of biodiversity. If we think about these before we read our answers, remember ecosystems that are more biodiverse are less susceptible to disease. They have more genetic diversity. We can, use biodiverse, areas with lots of plants for different resources. So think about those things as we go through the answers. So A, guarantees that the largest organisms will dominate the area. We didn't really talk about that. B, ensures a large amount of identical genetic material. So remember, we did talk about genetic material, and we talked about having a lot of it in a biodiverse community, but not identical. We want it to be more diverse, and that is better, that is healthier for the ecosystem. So B would not be correct because of this word identical here. C, develops relationships between organisms that are always positive over long periods of time. Well, that's not true. There's still going to be competition in a very biodiverse area. And D, increases the chance that some organisms will survive a major change in the environment. Yes, definitely. If you remember our biodiversity lab, we went through, and the ones with the more colored dots, the more different types of species, those were less susceptible to the disease that came through and wiped out all our conifers. So D is our answer. Okay, let's go back. I wanted to talk about the nitrogen cycle again. The way I explained it probably wasn't that great, so let's review this one more time. Okay, so it's asking to base your answer to the following question on the diagram below of a nitrogen cycle and your knowledge of biology. So it's looking for decomposers and which arrows are representing decomposers. So think about things that are breaking down dead material or organic waste. In this diagram, there's only a few things that are identifying as breaking down dead organic material, and the arrows pointing in a direction away from those things would be F, which is pointing away from our dead plant. So that's what a decomposer would do. It would break down that dead plant and convert it into ammonia. And then animal waste would be broken down by E as well and converted into ammonia. Later on, these parts of the nitrogen cycle over here, D and C, would be our conversion by different nitrifying bacteria to break it down into nitrites and nitrates, but don't worry about that part. Right now you're just working on getting what information you can out of a diagram and applying it. Okay, I think you guys are going to do really well on this test. Please study hard and please do not hesitate to email me with any more questions. Okay, have a great evening.